When it comes to your reproductive hormones, most people think about progesterone, estrogen, FSH, LH, but most people never consider melatonin. Stay tuned to today's episode for more information. Welcome back to the Sarah Kleiner Wellness YouTube channel and the Evolving Wellness podcast. I am so grateful that you are here for another episode. And today I'm going to talk with Nico Kennedy, who is a doula and really specializes in reproductive health, mother's health, and baby's health when it comes to our circadian rhythms and quantum biology. She has a lot of amazing insight and resources to share here. And she's also done a lot of really wonderful research on this topic. And if you are in the age where you are trying to get pregnant or improve your hormone balance or fertility, even if you're not trying to get pregnant, but you just want better hormone balance, this is a really, really wonderful and interesting episode to listen to. I'm also going to recommend that you follow Nico. I will put all of her information down in the show notes for you, her website. She has a fantastic Substack if you really want to learn more from her. So make sure to check those out. And you can always get my free resources, which are always in my show notes if you're new here and just want to learn about how to set up your perfect day when it comes to circadian rhythms, even if you have a busy job, live in a city, have a lot going on in your life. I have free guides just for you. So make sure you check those out, always linked in the show notes. And before we jump into today's episode, I want to thank two sponsors. The first one is Viva Rays. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays. They have fantastic circadian glasses as well as eye masks and earplugs that can really help keep you on track with your circadian rhythms. The second sponsor is Upgraded Formulas. They are my go-to source for checking mineral balance in the body. They have a great hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation. And I absolutely love their magnesium formula. It is nanoparticle technology, so it bypasses the gut. So if you're somebody that has issues absorbing magnesium because of gut issues, this is a really fantastic product. And you can use my code YOGI12 or YOGI if you've already used that one before. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode or watching. If you're on YouTube, give us a like, give us a comment. If you are listening on audio only, please head on over to Apple or Spotify and leave the show up to a 5-star review if it has helped you or a loved one, and make sure to share it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am super excited to have what I think is a super important conversation about women's health, fertility, pregnancy, postpartum from the circadian and quantum lens. So, Nico, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm happy to talk with you.
Yeah, it's great. We kind of are running the same circles with the Quantum Biology Collective, and I know we have a lot of similar views when it comes to this stuff. But let's just talk a little bit about you, your background, what you do. I know you just had a baby this summer, so we'll definitely talk about the whole postpartum circadian thing because it's a big question I get. But let's dive into your background a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yes, I have always wanted to support women in their births and make better experiences for babies. And that's something I've been slowly walking toward for the past 17 years. And so it's been many years of study and coming at that from a lot of different angles. At one point, I thought I was going to become an OB. And so I was in pre-med school and going through all of that. And then started coming into some information about home birth and different things. And then the things I had experienced was seeing births, knowing my own birth story. I saw my younger brother born. I saw my cousin born while I was still, in childhood at home. And those were really formative experiences and seeing the difference between a hospital situation and a home birth situation. And so after I graduated, I ended up backing out of the pre-med thing I was in and working and instead doing some doula trainings postpartum and then labor doula. And because I think that that's a lot of what's missing is like the care. So I kind of started with this, that like fear was one of the big things we needed to overcome. And then through the course of having my own babies, like you said, I had my fourth baby this summer. So I've had 4 births of my own and postpartum experiences. Through those, I've learned that fear is not the biggest challenge. And also with supporting families, it is a big hurdle to overcome for sure. But especially in this time, we face some really severe health challenges and environmental situations that are really challenging to the childbirth process. And a lot of people now are struggling with fertility, with keeping their pregnancies, with complications before as well as after birth. And so the longer I've spent in this space, the more that I've become more health focused, and particularly the environmental health focus with how light and our connection to nature drive fertility processes. And I think that's a big missing piece in the conventional paradigm. And even the natural birth community, I think, is missing a lot of this information that would really help people do better. So that's what I'm trying to bring to light and share, how all of this stuff fits in and can be worked into. Even a very modern lifestyle can still have a deeper connection, a more meaningful connection with nature. And that's my
Yeah.
big mission with the work that I'm doing.
I love that. And I think it's like I said, like you said, so many more people are struggling with secondary infertility now. So, what that means, if you're watching, you're like, what's secondary infertility? Is that maybe you had your first baby, it was like no problem getting pregnant, staying pregnant, all the things. Now you're having a subsequent pregnancy, or you're trying to have a subsequent pregnancy, and you're having a lot of difficulties getting pregnant, staying pregnant. That's what I went through. With my daughter, it was like an accident. Wasn't trying to get pregnant. And then with my son, it was
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, why is this so hard? And I saw that so many other women were in the same boat. And that connection, like you said, with light and with nature is not being talked about, even in the natural birth world. And in the people who are talking about holistic fertility, it's still like herbs and supplements. And, they at least have the sleep thing down. At least they talk about the importance of sleep, but they're,
Hmm.
they're missing like a whole other piece. Would you say?
I would. Yeah, I do. And there are definitely people who say, take a walk in nature.
Hmm.
Walking, I think, is another piece that a lot of people really have. Like, if you
Hmm.
have your sleep and you have your walks, you're really um, so far along compared with how so many people are living, where it is, just all day waking up inside, straight to coffee. Um, Inside all day, working inside, sedentary. Like the only outside time they're getting is maybe like between their car and their office or things like that.
Hmm.
And so even just like to add in a walk in nature as a daily habit, then you're so far ahead of the pack when it comes to that meaningful connection to the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And why I talk about this a lot, but I'd love to hear from your point of view, why are the light signals such an important thing for fertility? And you've got an amazing Substack, and where you really talk about all this stuff more in depth and provide some amazing scientific literature to back this up. But maybe we can delve
Hmm.
into that just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I had never been taught, I had many years of education in this, both inside of like university setting as well as in like, just the birth world, taking different classes and things. And no one ever told me that melatonin was a reproductive hormone. And, melatonin is the sleep hormone,
Hmm.
is how most people say it. But when I started diving into the research and I was kind of interested in sunshine, and I just started poking around, oh, what does sunshine do for us? I know that it feels really good. And started poking around PubMed and finding things. And then I stumbled into circadian, and then I'm reading circadian reproductive information and finding melatonin listed in the reproductive hormones. I'm like, wait, what's this? Melatonin is here right up there with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all these other ones. Okay, let's look deeper into this. And if you start peeling back melatonin and reproductive health, it is so synced up. And so in the quantum world, of course, we know there's a couple different kinds of melatonin. Um,
Yep.
and so we have that circadian melatonin that is only released at night, and we have the cellular
Mhm.
melatonin. And then when it comes to pregnancy, then there's also placental melatonin.
Ah.
And there's so much research there. it is so important. And it is like when you see disturbances in melatonin, you see problems with puberty, you see problems with reproductive health, you see problems with pregnancy. Anytime there's melatonin disturbance, you see problems in all those areas. Anytime you see problems in those areas, if you look at melatonin levels, then they're not right. So
Mhm.
it's like that's just one of many angles that you could start approaching this information if you wanted to find out like the science of why we need to have stable and strong circadian rhythms.
Yeah. And when I was going through infertility, it was progesterone, estrogen, estradiol, LH, FSH. Like, we got to test these and your AMH. And um, what I didn't know, which I wish I had known, is that when you work on the master circadian hormones, on melatonin, huge, but also leptin and your cortisol, you impact all of these other downstream hormones, and they can really shift and change pretty quickly. And
Hmm.
it's not about getting the perfect supplement protocol or not, like the seed cycling or any of that stuff. It's about
Hmm.
getting these master hormones to signal all the downstream ones correctly, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important. And of course, we talk a lot about how it impacts women, but it's also true for male reproductive cycles
Yes.
as well. And they are also running on a 60 to 90-day cycle leading up to the actual time that the pregnancy started, where their health is really impacted and their circulating melatonin levels are going to be affecting the quality of the sperm and also the hormones that drive the whole male side of things. So it's not
Mhm.
just women that need to be conscious of it. And I've also talked with people who think of circadian rhythm as only a male thing. And they say, oh, well, I thought
Mhm.
women just needed to focus on their lunar cycle. And I say, oh, no, all of the hormones are that stimulate ovulation are triggered at the end of the rest cycle, which should be in the morning when you're going out to get your morning sunshine. That triggers the surge of hormones that leads to the actual ovulation
Mhm.
and all of the other things that need to happen. So it's not just men that have a daily cycle and women that have a lunar cycle, because men also have this seasonal cycle of 60
Mhm.
to 90 days, and women also have the daily cycle, right? Like it's
Yeah.
ideally a family thing because likewise, once you have the baby, then there's the whole family cycle of getting the circadian rhythm of the entire environment correct so that the children are growing up in the best way and they're not having mood disturbances and all these other things we see with, again, that melatonin disruption, the
Mhm.
cortisol overload. Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that can be a difficult conversation for people because it does involve making changes to your household and to your lifestyle, but they're not really hard. It's not like you're telling everyone to go on a carnivore diet and,
Yeah.
throw out like everything in the house. It's like, let's change the lighting. Let's, if your kids are a little bit older, let's have people wear blue blockers, it can be simple. And for me, it's been something that's been really easy to implement with a newborn, with a baby.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's made a big difference. How about you?
Oh, it has made such a big difference. My first, she's over 10 now. We were really good in the beginning and then kind of fell off the wagon. And so we experienced like what it was like to have a really nice nestled postpartum. And then when she reached her toddler years, we kind of had relaxed on everything and then
Hmm.
started having different challenges. At that time, we didn't know any better and we had gotten her a tablet,
Mm.
and so it was a really big deal to wean her off of that. And now it's, absolutely no handheld devices for any of our children in the house. And we learned that lesson the hard way. Um, and then with the second, we were living in a city environment that was really difficult to regulate, and that was a lot more challenging. I've written in my Substack about the difference that I've experienced between having a labor where I was able to go outside and move around versus a labor inside of the hospital environment. And that, is the difference between having like a 12-hour super smooth
Ooh.
experience and a 49-hour, like really big endeavor where it was so hard to relax and let all of that sphincter control go inside of that environment where it's so like electrostatic and the lighting, there's a little bit of
Mhm.
control that you can do. Like I was in a birth supposedly baby friendly hospital and everything, but it was still like upper story. You can't open the window. You have a thermostat you can change and you can dim the lights, but you can't change the color of the lights in there,
Mhm.
you know? So,
Yeah.
um, you know, for me personally, it has made a huge difference. And then when you're talking about that postpartum time and the quality of sleep that you get when you're up with the newborn around the clock, if you're flipping on the light,
Oh,
then
yeah.
you're dysregulating your melatonin hugely because it takes a while to get back into where your melatonin's actually releasing. But when you turn on the light switch, it's an instant flip.
Mhm.
So it's not like you can just, it's not like your melatonin starts flowing again as soon as you turn the lights off, the way
Right.
that cortisol starts flowing as soon as you turn the lights on. So that was one of the really big things is when I first started doing this, I kind of thought like, oh, a little bit of light's really quick. Like I'm just gonna, you know, turn on the porch light real quick or, you know, whatever. I'm gonna go see what the dogs are after. And, and now I've kind of learned that every bit of light at night can be really disrupting and that it adds up a lot over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with breastfeeding and postpartum period that I talk with women. I'm a stickler about not being on your phone when you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night. And that's
Hmm.
a lot of women, like I said that on a live stream recently, and I had a lot of women that were
Wow.
like, "What? Like you don't go on your phone when you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night?" I'm like, "Hell no." Like no, absolutely not. Like that's the worst. Have a phone next to a newborn, number one, or a baby.
Yes.
That's
Hmm.
really, really not good for underdeveloped, undermyelinated brain that doesn't have that really well developed blood brain barrier, right?
Yeah.
Their nervous
Hmm.
system is not myelinated. So number one, there's a non-native EMF, but also like you're blasting your eyes with
Hmm.
blue light from your device, right?
Hmm.
And then that's also going to come out in your breast milk. So that's another thing a lot of people don't know is that, whatever hormones that you have going on, there it's coming out in your breast milk. So if you've got all this cortisol pumping in the middle of the night, guess what's going to happen with the baby? Guess who's going to have a much harder time falling back asleep, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then the oxytocin regulation as well is one of the things that is
Oh
like
yeah.
tied all in with these hormones. And it's this way where like the researchers are still kind of trying to pick out and they're like, wait, how is oxytocin fitting in with all of this? Because it's not a direct circadian regulation, but there's definitely a feedback loop that's happening.
Mm.
And the oxytocin, of course, is helping to make the milk flow and relax. And so, again, if you're distracted on the phone, there's also the mental aspect that,
Yes.
when your baby is nursing, it's not just the physical nutrition that they're getting, but there's also the
Hormonal.
flow of love that they're absorbing, and that their oxytocin receptors, the way that it's set in early life, can affect them the rest of their lives. And so, in my work
Mm.
with women in the birth suite, um, we know that if women have had a traumatic early childhood, that they won't have as many oxytocin receptors in their body. And so
Wow.
that can really come down the line in a big way when you're looking at like stalled labor and things, because labor is an oxytocin driven process. And then again, with breastfeeding, there are a lot of women who have like an adverse reaction to the letdown reflex, which for a woman with
Mm.
a whole healthy regulated system, it feels so good. There's nothing that feels better than nourishing your baby. But for women who have had these like really dysregulated hormonal systems, it can be almost traumatic for the letdown reflex. And so then we're looking at helping people with that. And so, if anyone who's listening has had that experience, one of the biggest recommendations I can give is to go outside and try
Mm.
breastfeeding outside, because the nature opens up things in the hormonal pathways, and like there's no closer connection to our source of vitality. And so if the baby feels like it's taking away from you, if you go out in nature, then there's nature nourishing you in that moment. So if you go out and feel the sunshine, see the sky, be on your porch or whatever, that can really help with those feelings. And because they are all in regulation with the circadian rhythm. So healing the circadian rhythm can really help heal emotional pathways too. And that's, I think,
Mm.
something that's kind of overlooked and maybe not explicitly stated in the research, but that I've talked with a lot of women anecdotally who have had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like everybody and their sister is a nervous system coach now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, there's so much that can be done with the nervous system. And I think there are some great practitioners out there. I have a really close friend of mine who I refer people to, who's an expert who's been doing it for the last, 15, 20 years. And so I trust her.
Mhm.
But there's so many like kind of people out there who say they're nervous system coaches and they don't really get it. And
Mhm.
that something that's been cool is if my friend who is the nervous system, that's her deal. Like she's been doing it for 20 years. Carrie and I both kind of introduced her to this quantum circadian way of living. And she's just been so blown away by it. Her and her
Mhm.
husband, both who are practitioners. And she's like, wait a second, like this is another really important pathway for people that's so easy and free that can help with the nervous system regulation. And I think it's absolutely been key for me 100%.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you look at the collagen network, if we talk about grounding a little bit, and the collagen touches every part of the system. So sometimes some of that dysregulation may not even be from an emotional
Mm,
part of history, but from physical trauma that's happened, like from car accidents and things where there's like deep seated inflammation or little things that haven't quite healed yet. And so when connecting to nature and grounding, and that collagen can get in there and deliver the healing energy. And then when that internal, like minor infection that's been brewing for potentially years gets healed, then the body has a sense of freedom and safety.
mm,
So some, you know what I mean? Like it can be very subconscious things that are leading to those feelings that aren't necessarily from like emotional trauma, but physical trauma or all kinds of things that can make uncomfortable feelings that
mhm.
then get exacerbated in postpartum because melatonin is a major antioxidant. And so if the melatonin is getting dysregulated, then suddenly all of the inflammatory processes can go out, really flare up quickly. And I think that's what a lot of women experience is they start feeling undernourished from breastfeeding and being awake.
Mm,
And then they also get the melatonin dysregulation from not having their environment. And it's just kind of the perfect storm for any underlying issues to suddenly arise, like
mhm.
postpartum or perinatal is the most common time for a woman to get a mental health diagnosis. But it's usually something that was kind of before and maybe underdiagnosed or was just like
Mhm.
kind of below the surface and everything was okay. But then that additional stress of the new baby is what will bring that out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my health really suffered when my daughter was little, after I was even out of the postpartum period. It was like everything went downhill, gut issues, inflammation, everything was just crazy. And I look back and I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah, this makes perfect sense as to why everything got so dysregulated because there was no, I didn't even think about going outside for sunrise or UVA light. I didn't see the point, or, even I didn't think of it. No one was talking about it. And
Mhm.
sleep was a mess because she'd wake up at night a bunch and turn on all the lights. And, like just there, very simple things could have been implemented that could have been incredibly helpful. It's why I want to keep having these kinds of conversations that hopefully the right people hear them and they can
Mhm.
really avoid a lot of pain and suffering.
Yeah, yeah. I was working as a postpartum doula a number of years ago, and I was staying doing overnight care for a family. And this baby, it was really sweet in the morning. So this baby was having a little bit of jaundice, and so
Mm.
the mom would need to have a shower or something. I would take the baby out, and we'd catch some of that early morning light because it's the blue light that helps break up the bilirubin. So I take the baby out for
Mhm.
a while, and really it would have been ideal if the mom could have been coming out too, but she was doing stuff. So I remember being out with the baby, but then in the nighttime, I remember um, walking down the hallway and they had these automatic night lights, like for
Oh,
safety,
yeah.
right? It lights up the hallway so that you
Mhm.
see, but they were really
Mhm.
blue enriched, like they were like
Oh,
bright twinkling blue little stars.
oh.
And I wasn't super, like, I knew about circadian stuff, but I just kind of was at that time, it was something that I was doing personally, and I wasn't really thinking of it as something I needed to share in my professional work. It was like, oh, they do their homes the way they do, and I'm going to do my home the way I do. But then later on, I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, that home and like the baby had jaundice and like it was a really hard time for the family. And then that, really blew like every time because how many, like, especially towards the end of pregnancies, women are up over and over and over again to
Mhm.
go pee because of that bladder pressure. And then
Yes.
it's actually physiological too, because the belly is so heavy that it can overly compress the blood vessels and be dangerous for the baby. So it's
Mhm.
actually physiological to have a lot of night wakings at the end of pregnancy. And
Oh,
women who
yeah.
don't have those have a higher likelihood of stillbirth or other complications. So,
Oh, wow, that's
which is
fascinating.
opposite in the first trimester. If women aren't sleeping well in the first trimester, there's a higher likelihood of mood disorders and problems down the line. So it's like you need good sleep in the first trimester, but by the third trimester, we're expecting sleep to be upset from what we think of as normal. And we could talk a little bit more about some of the different sleep myths that are in
Yeah.
the kind of mainstream idea compared with what is true about circadian rhythm. Um, because that was one of the biggest breakthroughs for me was
Mm.
realized when I read a paper that was talking about the 8-hour consolidated sleep as an artificial construct of a 16-hour artificial lighting schedule. I was like, whoa. And so had people in a lab and they started putting different kind of lighting schedules on them. And suddenly they're breaking into biphasic or polyphasic sleep patterns. And the
Mm.
researchers, and this is where the idea of bright light therapy came from, was from this researcher's lab so many years ago. And he said the light is what's triggering sleep. And so sleep is an effect of the environment. And a lot of people think of sleep as the circadian rhythm, and they're different. So I like to share with families there's a difference between circadian disruption and sleep disruption. They're not the same
Mm.
thing, even though they're tied and they will come about in the same way. If you have sleep disruption, you're likely to have circadian disruption, but not necessarily if your environment is right. If your environment is right, you could still have a healthy circadian rhythm, even though you're waking up several times in the night. By keeping the light environment, you can still have that melatonin be stable. And
Mm.
then you're not, as long as you get the total amount over time. So for women who are postpartum, I'm always telling them, stay in bed longer than you think you need to. I used a sleep tracker for my pregnancy this last time, and it would take me 12 hours in bed to get, 8.5 hours of sleep.
Mm. Yep.
And when I did that, I would feel great. And if I tried to limit myself to 8 or 9 hours in bed, that's not the sleep reality. And so I was actually really sleep deprived on times when I didn't give myself that allowance.
Yeah, I think that the a problem I see just across the health space, not even just in this little, pregnancy, birth, and fertility space, is that everyone is looking for a protocol and like a specific period of time. And then I do this protocol for 10 minutes a day. And, then I am all better. And it's like, it's so individual. Like what you just said with the sleep, it's like, yeah, you might need to be in bed a lot longer to get what your body actually needs to restore and repair. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one thing Dr. Gazvini told me when I was trying to get pregnant was like, you need dark and you need cold because we were heading into the winter months. It was October when he
Hmm.
told me this. And he's like, for you to get pregnant, you need dark and you need cold. You need to be making as much melatonin as humanly possible. And you need to be sleeping. And, don't try to do anything else right now. Like that's what you need to be doing. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, done. And it worked. It
Yeah.
really, really worked. So I think that's key
Hmm.
for people to understand.
Right. Yeah. And getting all of that balance can help with dealing with the charges. And so, like, a lot of women have really severe morning sickness in early
Mm.
pregnancy, and that is partially related to their overall load of oxidative stress. So, for women
Mm.
who do manage to get pregnant but still have that dysregulated melatonin, um, it can really make the early pregnancy experience super gnarly with the feelings of queasiness and everything, because
Mm.
that's their body feeling sick because there's excess oxidative stress. And like,
Mm.
oxidative stress is counterbalanced by antioxidants, but when you look at oral antioxidants, which is what most people think of, It doesn't necessarily fix the problem. And especially because the body is using oxidative stress in the immune system. In early pregnancy, there's a different redox balance compared with non-pregnancy and compared with later in pregnancy, because the implantation is essentially an open wound. And so having a more oxidative state at that site helps prevent infection and also facilitates the remodeling. The embryo is going through such drastic changes during that time, and that is driven in part by the redox and using all of that positive charge to rip things apart and put them back together. And that's where collagen work and infrared can be so helpful in, in the belly area to help with the feelings that all that brings. Like I was saying, a lot of people, it's essentially inflammation, and inflammation is really tied in with anxiety. So sometimes it's like this negative cascade of poor sleep, poor redox status, nausea, and then the nausea further causes the anxiety, which further unbalances redox. And it's this cascade where it can be a completely miserable experience where, they work so hard to get pregnant. They're so excited to get pregnant. And then it's like, wham, and all these underlying things can come out. And it's, really people can be blindsided by the intensity of that experience. And especially where they're like, maybe they don't want to share that they're pregnant yet if they've been having recurring miscarriages, for example. A lot of women, they're like, well, I'm just not even going to tell anyone that I'm pregnant. But then they have no social support for this really like dire feeling situation.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard. So as a doula, that's where like, I wish people would reach out earlier on to get social support from a professional if they're not going to reach out in their community. And of course, ideally having moms and sisters and friends around can help. But that's not the reality for a lot of people.
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And I just wanted to thank you quickly for being a listener, for being engaged with the show, and remind you I have tons of free resources down in the show notes for you. If you're just getting started on your circadian health or your quantum health journey, I've got Building Your Perfect Quantum Day. I have a free guide to using blue blockers. If you're like, how do I even use these things? I also have a guide called Shorter Days, Longer Nights, if you're in the middle of winter listening to this, and a lot of really helpful resources if you're brand new here. And you can always save by using the code podcast on any of my courses. I have a ton of courses if you want to dive deeper into some of these topics. So thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying the episode, please, if you're on YouTube, give us a like, leave us a comment, share with a friend or a family member or in a Facebook group. If you're listening on the audio only podcast, head on over to Spotify or Apple to leave the show up to a 5-star review. Every little bit helps. We want to continue to share this message of healing. And this is really looking at it through the lens of not using a ton of supplements and medications and really looking at things differently. And I want to continue to spread this message. So thank you so much for listening. And let's jump back into the show.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't announce my pregnancy until I was like 22 weeks, I think.
Wow.
I had been through so many losses that I just was like, I don't want to put it out there, and that was like social media. I told my family immediately and they were all like, oh, we're going to pray and, hope this one comes through. And so I told the people that were important to me, but I didn't really like announce it to friends and the world until I was like over halfway through,
Right. Yeah. And a lot of women that have fertility challenges go through that, and it can be kind of a lonely and uncertain experience.
Yeah, definitely. It is scary, and that was my biggest regret with pregnancy, was that I didn't enjoy it more because I was just all, kind of like, is he okay? Let me go chug some ice water. Let me do something to make him move around. Like when he was born, he was probably like, this is the crazy woman who's been like poking me for all these months and drinking all this cold crap to make me jump around.
Yeah.
But it's such a huge problem. Yeah. And
well, you're definitely not alone in that, and having been through that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I talk about it now, because I know that's like so many, it's hard to talk about it when you're going through it and you've got a big community, because a lot of people are well-meaning, but then they say stupid things too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so true.
It's like that overbearing family member, yet it's like, 30 people out randomly on social media. It's a different ball game, but yeah, even women who don't have that, they do have those overbearing relatives or overbearing people in their life who are, even my mom would say the wrong thing and it would upset me during pregnancy because you're just so fragile during that time, and you need people to be positive and loving and supportive. But yeah, it can be tough for sure.
Yeah. When I was in labor with my first son, my second baby, and it had worked out that I was having a hospital birth for that. My other babies were all born at home, but for his, with one thing and another, was having a hospital birth. We were low risk and everything, but that environment was so challenging. I shared a little bit about that for me to relax into. And I had also had a lot of family support there. And eventually when finally things turned around, someone was like, what can we do for you? I'm like,
leave,
go away.
Please get out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, I needed that personal bubble to really relax into everything. We got all the lights out, I buried my head and, got down to business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be a really challenging thing to do, to get that barrier, that emotional space.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, let's jump back into this topic of secondary infertility a little bit, because I feel again, like I didn't know what a huge problem it was until I went through it, but a lot of women are struggling with it. And there've been some, more prominent like social media people and even celebrities that have come out, and a lot of them go down like what I did, do the IVF route.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, which is not something I recommend because that didn't work. It was unsuccessful it was unsuccessful.
Yeah. And that's such a big expense and emotional everything. And for it to not work out, which is actually common. I was I'm doing this program I'm trying to go through everything like really methodically in this new video series that I'm doing. And so I was doing a bunch of research into the IVF, which usually isn't part of my space, but I've had, the first IVF moms this year. I had never supported anyone who hadn't been pregnant naturally before. And then this year it's, started, and I was like, okay, well, I need to learn more about this. So I started looking into it. And when I was looking at the percentage success rates, my heart just went out to those women, because I mean, it's challenging. We think of, known pregnancies have like a 20% chance of failure, but some of the IVF, it's like a 20% chance of success, depending on the scenario. And I was just, my heart, I was just kind of like, oh, like this is heavier than I realized, because I am used to seeing the success stories. And I think there's a lot of media from people who are doing IVF, and they're like, well, look at all of our success. But I have known women personally who've tried and not been able to conceive, even with all of that support.
Yeah.
And then, looking at it statistically, like, wow, that's actually a lot of failure there. That's a huge risk.
Yeah, it's a huge financial risk, and the emotional risk is huge. And then what it does to your body, some women can go through early menopause. Like it can really, really screw you up big time. Yeah, it's not good. I always say my son was just like, I'm not coming that way. Like, get it together, woman. We can do this. You don't need all those needles and all that help. Like we can do this. I always like pictured him saying that like as a little spirit baby, but I think a lot of women suffer through that whole process, and I don't know that it's necessary when we can implement some of these strategies, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think this conversation is also related with, I've seen a bunch of influencers popping up that are talking about perimenopause. Have you been seeing that?
Oh yeah.
And as though I almost feel like they're kind of normalizing it rather than saying like, this is a sign that there's something wrong. And instead they're kind of like, let's empower you through this and deal with it the best you can. And I'm kind of like, this really is a sign of some serious dysregulation in the body for it to happen that early in a woman's life.
In your 30s. Like I've seen it, like influencers in their late 30s talking about in mid 30s, talking about perimenopause. And I'm like, I mean, I'm 44 and I'm still having like regular cycles.
Yeah.
They did flip, so I'm a little worried. Like, oh shit, now I'm having the cycle like on the new moon and ovulating on the full moon again, like I did when I got pregnant with my son. So like,
Oh.
not trying to call in any more babies right now, but
Yeah.
it did flip back to that.
They may be
like,
calling you.
I know, like,
Yeah. I saw a midwife posting recently about a 45-year-old woman that they had supported. And, you know, you see all of the women sharing, you know, especially, you know, traditional midwife kind of characters saying that it's not a problem for women to be having, you know, that the geriatric pregnancy is a myth and all of that. And I looked into the data, and there is really a fear tactic that the doctors use, where they're saying, you know, the risk of stillbirth doubles, but they don't say this is like the relative risk doubles. Right. So it's from like 1 in 2,000 to 2 in 2,000. Like the absolute risk is still super, super low. And it has a lot more to do with whatever comorbidities a woman has picked up over the years than it does with her actual age. And then particularly for women who have had successful pregnancies before, there is a slight higher risk for women who are getting pregnant the first time at that age. But for women who have already had babies, generally it's not nearly as big of a deal as they make it seem.
No. And even my midwife, like I talked about this on a podcast I just did recently, is like, I hit 39 weeks and she's like, well, we're going to have to induce you if you get to 40 weeks. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not coming near me with Pitocin. Like, no, absolutely not. Thankfully, both of my babies were like 30. Alexis was 39 weeks, 2 days. James was 39 weeks, 5 days. And so like, I think that's just what my body does. Like, it's like, okay, 39 weeks, like we're good. And then plus we don't even really know the exact, like, that whole date of concept, it's, there's so much to it. And people are just with the whole age thing, I've had women in their late 40s, in some of my groups doing this circadian stuff that they're like, when am I going to get these perimenopause symptoms everyone keeps talking about? I'm like, well, you might not. You might be okay. You might kind of like sail through this. And I've had a lot of women kind of just like sail through this time in their life. So I'm like I said, I'm 44 and I'm like, I'm good. I know that if I stress myself out too much, then I will have more PMS and and I know it, I feel it. I kind of like did too much fasting because I was like stressed out and I didn't feel like eating during the first part of my cycle. And I did that too much. So now I'm paying for it by being like extra, like kind of edgy this last week before my period, but I'm not like having rage fits and like unbearable cramps and hot flashes and mood swings and all that stuff. Like I can feel it when I'm not taking care of myself the way that I should. Yeah. But it's not like a lot of these influencers out there saying, and it's like, I wonder how you would feel if you got your light, dark cycles figured out, and optimize. This is another one I saw today that I almost lost my mind, but I was like, I'm not going to do it. There's this hormone doctor, and Carrie and I are both like, if we could just get her to take our freaking fertility class, because she's struggling going through IVF multiple. I think she's like on her 5th round or something right now. And she's been sharing about it, and she's a hormone doctor. Right. And in her reels, she's wearing sunglasses. Okay. Like all the time sunglasses. And I'm like, oh, stop. And today her reel was her wearing sunglasses and a hat saying, you need only 20 minutes a day for vitamin D production. And I'm like,
no,
not true.
So reductionist to equate sunshine with vitamin D when there's so many more things involved.
It's the end of December right now. So most of the people watching your reel can't even get vitamin D right now. You're not even talking about that. And so she's like, if you want to improve your fertility, start taking vitamin D supplements. And I'm like, no, Like I said,
No.
like I
Yeah.
wanted to, I just
Okay,
was like,
eat some
but
sardines.
I don't even know what
That
to
might
say
help.
to this one. Yeah.
Yeah, like eating some sardines might help, but if it's coming, like I looked into it, I was like, what's this vitamin D stuff made out of? And they're like, lichen or lanolin irradiated.
No.
Okay.
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And this is so interesting because there's the perimenopause end of things. And then there's also, I'm getting a lot of women who are saying, help me with my daughter, who are in their teen years. And
Yes,
they're
the
like,
PCOS is rampant.
PCOS is huge. And
Yeah.
I think about my cycles were really bad when I was in high school. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, what was happening? I was waking up well before the sunrise. It was the like blooming of all of these energy efficient lights that are super bloom rich. So it's like early morning, straight to the fluorescent and LEDs. Sugary breakfast, into stressful classes,
fat-free, everything. Yep.
Yeah. And then in school all day, and then in sports, super, big exercise draw, late dinner after sunset, then do homework and like crash into bed. And I was, there was like the fitness thing. And so like I would do like sit-ups and push-ups before bed, even though I was in sports, because I was like, oh, I've got to keep my abs fit. So then like another workout before bed, and then turn the lights off after that, and then be sitting there with like eyes flashing, mind racing, like struggling to fall asleep, and then like slamming into the alarm clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And my period was so painful at that time.
Same.
Like it really was kind of crippling. And I remember like having the hot water bottle and all that stuff. And once I finished college, all that stuff went away. It was completely lifestyle driven. Yeah. And I just kind of had bought into the idea that it was tough. And I remember like when I started my period, my mom said, oh, well, you better take a vitamin with iron in it.
Oh, yes. I know, the iron pills.
And then now, now they're like, oh, oops, women who take iron supplements across their life are like have a 5-year shorter lifespan than women who don't. Like, there's so much stuff that, people, I want to think that people are well-meaning in that and not like deliberately trying to mess people up. But it's like, how could anyone be recommending iron supplements at this point when it's so much related again to the oxidative stress question, that if a woman's eating a sufficient diet and still has iron problems, that it's usually oxidative stress, burning up all of that iron, and it's an impaired iron recycling system, not an impaired intake system. So it's like, if you're leaking and flushing, it doesn't make sense to just keep adding more and more. It's like not taking your, if your car's leaking oil, you don't just keep pouring oil. Oh, every morning we've got to pour in the oil. It's like, take it in and get the seals fixed.
Exactly.
And we can see that in a machine, but people try to treat the body like a machine, and it's not. It's a living system that's meant to be connected to the earth.
Yeah. And then they put girls on birth control pills, and they stay on birth control pills until they're ready to get pregnant, and then they can't get pregnant. Like, that's another huge problem I'm seeing. The huge problem is like, I was put on birth control pills because my periods were so horrible, and it was the only thing I could do to make them better. And then now I can't get pregnant, now I'm ready to get pregnant and I can't.
Yeah. And then they give them like a progesterone cream. They're like, oh, well, when you conceive, like put this progesterone cream on.
No.
Yeah. And so we have to look at why is the endocrine system so dysregulated? And so much of it has to do with light, with not treating melatonin as a reproductive hormone.
Yes.
With not grounding to the earth, with all of the, non-native EMFs, like opening up the calcium channels. Like if you look at calcium regulation, that's super interesting. Calcium's really into how it works a lot with melatonin. And then also, when you look at the cascade of things that happen with newborn jaundice, and I put together a course about this because I was just kind of horrified, but there's this, you look at like, here's all the different things, and there's like 20 different factors. And then all of them boil down to intracellular calcium is the last piece that everything feeds into before it crosses the blood-brain barrier and causes irreversible damage. And so if the calcium balance is the last defense of the blood-brain barrier, and then you put a newborn in an incubator And they have the research to prove that grounded incubators
Oh, yes.
give better outcomes for newborns, but they're putting them
Yes.
in this super high EMF environment, which,
Mhm.
as we know, opens the calcium channels inside of cells. And so I'm looking at it,
Yes.
I'm like, how can we look at newborn babies, unmyelinated, have a really delicate calcium balance, and then they need all of this machinery? Like, we need
Right.
to ground that machinery. There's just like, the research is so explicit
Mhm.
that that's the direction we need to be going in, and that it could
Yeah.
be, like, universally better outcomes for premature babies. And of course, if we could get babies to go full term, that's a better thing, and
Yeah.
all of the circadian health will help with that. But even when people are in super diseased states, all of this information can still be so helpful for
Yeah.
getting people like back on course, back connected to health.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
it's just vital. My daughter was jaundice. I also think that had to do with the fact that they gave her 2 vaccines within the first day of life
Oh.
that they didn't
Mhm.
ask me if they could do. They just did it.
Wow. Mhm.
Um, and my son was not. My husband was like, "Oh, he's going to be," because they told me, since I'm O negative and my daughter
Mhm.
was A positive, they were like, "Well, your blood mixed, and that's why she's jaundice."
Right.
My son is O positive and I'm O negative. I didn't get any alien children. Like, O
Mhm.
negative is like the alien blood type, apparently.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I have A negative
yeah,
and had a baby that was A positive,
yeah,
and same.
yeah.
They did all the fear taxing and everything. And like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with a blood product coming into me after
No,
what happened, because you don't know what you don't know. And so, like,
no.
before they knew about AIDS, people getting ROGAM were infected with AIDS
Right.
through that. And I was like, is that better for the mom and baby? No. And
No,
you don't,
no.
like, we don't know all the viruses that exist, so we can't test for all the viruses that
Right.
exist. So no,
Right.
you're not going to put in a blood
A
product in
blood
me while I'm
product.
pregnant.
Right.
That no, that
Yeah, I
doesn't sit
didn't.
right with me.
I got a lot of pressure for that with my son. I was like, nope, we're not
Mhm.
doing it. And I even did a unity screen, which you can
Mhm.
tell. And my midwife didn't even know about it. I went to someone else because my husband works in women's healthcare, so he knows about all the NIPT
Oh, good.
tests.
Yeah.
He was like, I have a doctor that will let you come and take the test there. And so I
Mhm.
went in someone else's practice just to take this test because I was getting all this pressure to get the ROGAM, and it still came back, the baby has a positive blood type. And I was like, I'm not doing it. Like, or
Mhm.
yeah, he has a positive and you're a negative. And I was like, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
doing it. And he didn't have jaundice. He's been ridiculously healthy,
Mhm.
has
Yeah,
never, he's had a fever once, which is good, I think, to have a
I
fever
think so too.
and
Mhm.
overcome it without Tylenol or anything. But like,
Mhm.
just been a completely different experience. And the stuff that we've done with light and circadian rhythms and grounding and just like the simple stuff, I think has
Yeah.
been the biggest differentiator between, all the issues my daughter had and then my son having this like, much easier time transitioning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make a big difference. And it takes 2 to 3 years for the circadian rhythm to really fully form after birth.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so during that time, a lot of the way that they're getting their rhythm is through, like you said, the mom's breast
Breast
milk
milk.
is a
Yeah.
really, and her hormonal cues are
Hmm.
really important for that. And for the babies going through it, there's a mini puberty that
Mm.
happens in the first like 6 months of a boy's
Yeah.
life and the first two
Yep.
to 3 years of a girl's life. And they still are trying to figure out, why is this longer for girls than it is for boys?
Very interesting.
But their reproductive access is really getting um, built in that time. And so, knowing the connections between the endocrine axis and the circadian rhythm, I'm thinking like,
Mm.
so many women are not breastfeeding and they're having these soy-based formulas
Mm.
in this crucial time for their circadian development, which is
Yeah.
regulating the endocrine. And then so many, people are having trouble in puberty. And uh, the estrogen is also something that protects against like mental health challenges. And
Mm.
so when I see like statistics about the mental health challenges like ADHD and autism, and a lot of times they show up earlier in boys than in girls because they
Mhm.
have less estrogen. Um, and so you see the rates of that kind of change. And then in puberty, the girls tend to catch up with all of the anxiety and depressive symptoms. There's like, it's just we were talking about like infertility. And I think the mental health piece is another thing that's happening that is really a lot bigger deal than it was so many decades ago.
Huge.
And that's
Everyone
also
is
really
talking about their anxiety issues and their depression issues. And I'm like, get off your damn phone, go outside. Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
crazy because I've experienced this myself, and it's something that I'm going to continue talking about, is like having crippling anxiety, crippling depression, horrible insomnia for most of my life, and then finding this and eating disorders. I mean, I've dealt with all of them, like forget it, like all of them. And now the last 4 years, I've really been doing this stuff consistently. It's like, oh my gosh, like I don't need antidepressant. When I have difficult situations in my life, yes, I feel still anxiety and depression. It's normal, but I can weather through those things. It's not like crushing where I just want to just stay in my bed and can't talk to anyone. And like, it's a completely different experience. And it's all light and dark cycles, you know, and that morning sunlight. And it's just, it's free, you know? It's like,
I know. While I was really first starting to dive into all of this, I found a paper that was about fluoride and autism. And they were saying fluoride inhibits melatonin production. So let's look at, you know, how much fluoride is in the water, what are the autism rates, and drawing this connection between fluoride indirectly contributing to autism symptoms because of the melatonin suppression, and showing how when they would do sleep therapy with the children, their symptoms would improve. And inside of that paper, there was a chart that was like melatonin. And then outside of it, they had all the different systems of the body that melatonin is responsible for supporting. And then this big ring that's like, okay, so anything that inhibits melatonin is simultaneously impacting all of these different symptoms, all of these different systems. And so that's why it's taken so long to get here, is that we've all been coming at trying to get to the center from all of these different places. And so we're looking at, you know, things like mood or things like fertility. For me, it was the immune system. When I hit puberty and went into college and was having all of that stress and sleep disruption, I started getting seasonal allergies. And people told me, oh, it's just normal these days. Like the older you get, the worse your allergies are going to be.
Right.
And that was just, you know, oh, that's just your diagnosis. There's nothing we can do. And then I started having skin allergic reactions, which were really frustrating because they had no test that could tell me what the trigger was. It wasn't anything normal. Eventually, I tracked it down to hydrolyzed quinoa protein, which is like an ingredient in natural soaps. And I'm like, but I can eat quinoa, but like hydrolyzed quinoa protein.
Wow.
And it was thanks to some gal sharing on the internet. And so then I went to my doctor and they said, oh, you found your trigger, just avoid it. And I'm like, that doesn't get to the point of why is this happening?
Right.
And
why is my body building a defense against this?
Yeah. So when I fixed my nighttime light environment, now it's been years since I've had an outbreak.
Wow.
My seasonal allergies, if they even show up, are super, super mild. And, you know, I was fixing my light environment just like I'm like, I'm just going to try this. Like, this sounds interesting.
Yeah,
you know, it was like a new diet or something.
Right.
You know?
It's a low risk thing for people. It's very low risk and it's very easy.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, and it wasn't until like later, all of a sudden I was like, hey, it's been years since I had one of those horrible flare-ups. And then, wow. And then when I saw that, the melatonin and immune system, and I was like, oh, that's what happened. I fixed my melatonin, my allergic contact dermatitis, and my seasonal allergies went away. Wow. Cool.
Yeah. Pretty amazing stuff. It really is. Yeah.
I know. Like, what if someone had been able to tell me that? And so that's part of why I share the story, is that it was that gal saying like, oh, for her, it was hydrolyzed wheat protein. But I was like, oh, hydrolyzed. And so I looked at all the bottles in the bathroom, like, what's hydrolyzed? Kick them out. And then, oh, no more reaction. So I think it is really important for us to share our stories and the things that we've been through. And especially for this information where it's like the same like protocol of nighttime darkness, morning sunshine, like timing your eating to the daylight, that kind of thing, that it can have such widespread impacts on well-being. Like it can heal, you know, or we don't necessarily say heal or cure.
It gives your body the capacity to be robust enough to heal these things. And I think that's the that's what is so lovely about this field, is that we're not healing anything or giving you supplements to suppress or medication to suppress. We're supporting your body's own ability to heal through giving it the correct signals, to make your mitochondria more efficient, right?
Mhm. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the energy. That's, they say the powerhouse of the cell, but you don't think about how if you don't have enough power, you can't do all of the different things. And so that's one of the things that was kind of a turnoff for people, I think, when you start talking about like electrons or that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. You're like, that's small. I want something big.
Big.
I
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
but it's like, but those small things of energy flow, if you think that, your body needs energy to be able to do work. And so if your ability to do work is impaired, then everything's going to slowly break down. Whereas if you have full energy, then you can actually do all the things that you need to do.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so key. Well,
Hmm.
just kind of wrapping up, what do you think is the most important thing for just women in general to understand when it comes to the work that you do? What's one like big nugget that people can take home?
Geez, just
I
to
know it's
sum
a
it
loaded
all up
question.
into one. I don't know. I think that it's that nature is there for you
Mm,
because it's so much, that if you can pattern your life off of what the natural season around you is doing, that is where all of your fertility can go through. And when you look into nature, like bear mamas don't have um, anxiety and all of these issues that we think of as normal.
yeah.
And bear mamas know to sleep in the cold and the dark and to eat the food that's around them. Like, they don't love it when it's spring and they have to eat all that grass. They'd rather be feasting on salmon all year, but they,
Hmm.
go through the seasons in that way. And so I think it's different for each person what the specific piece that they can use to reconnect with nature. But I think that is a goal, to know that the big round planet and the big round sun are what will nourish your big round belly,
Mm,
and give you the energy for it to be a beautiful, positive experience. Like for me, it was darkness. Like that was the piece
hmm.
that I was missing.
Same.
But for other people, it could be sunshine. It could be, maybe they have a habit of eating chocolate in the middle of the night that's really throwing them off. Or, I think for each person, it could be different the way that they're
Hmm.
specifically pushing nature away. But to re-welcome nature, I think is the best way to re-welcome your fertility and your fertile powers.
I love that. That's wonderful. Well, if people are just listening, I'll make sure to have all of your links in the show notes. But if someone's maybe
Mm-hmm.
driving and they're like, oh, how do I find her? What's an easy way someone can
Mm-hmm.
find you?
There's my website, nikokennedy.com, and that's where I have doula services and one-to-one consults. I do in-person and virtual. And then my website, Brighter Days, Darker Nights, which you can also get to from my other website, and it's on its own. And that's where you can get all of my learning materials and read. I have a 4-hour pregnancy, birth, and infancy workshop that's really popular there. So definitely recommend that. And I'm on Instagram as Brighter Days, Darker Nights as well. So I think that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm open to emails and all of that. So just, yeah, looking
Perfect.
forward to connecting with people. It's lovely. And I love talking with women who are ready to embrace nature and, maybe want some of the specifics about why and how to tune their particular situation, since it can be so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been really lovely, and I'm excited to share this with my community.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was lovely chatting with you. I loved hearing your stories and just your attitude of all of this is so wholesome. And yeah, you seem so grounded, and like the proof is in the pudding when you look at you and be like, yeah, this is a person who, has been through a healing journey and come through really in a solid way. And now you're turning around to help people. It's so beautiful. And
Oh,
yeah,
thank
the world's lucky
you.
to have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Nico. Again, remember to head down to the show notes and check out her information. Follow her over on Substack. She's got really great things to share, especially if you're looking to optimize your hormones and if you're looking to get pregnant, stay pregnant, or even support yourself through pregnancy and the postpartum period, where we actually need a lot more support and people don't really pay attention to this. So make sure to follow her, get all of her information. And thank you to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's show. You can use my code YOGI to save there. And thank you again to Upgraded Formulas for sponsoring today's episode. They have a fantastic magnesium product. If you are looking to supplement magnesium, most of us are deficient, by the way. Code there is YOGI12 or YOGI. And make sure you check out all my free resources if you're just getting started, if you're new here and you really want to learn how to implement these things into your daily life. That is a fantastic way to start with my free resources. And don't forget to leave us a comment over on YouTube or a review over on Apple or Spotify to help get the show out to more people. Thank you so much for listening or watching, whichever one you're doing. And I will talk with you again next week.